Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. Hey, you like secrets? You like Marvel vs. Capcom? Or what about Marvel superheroes versus Street Fighter, huh? Pretty cool. Yeah, I got the codes. And I know all about the secret characters. And, if you stick around, I'll tell you about them.
Marvel vs. Capcom!
Yeah, Marvel vs. Capcom. What a beloved franchise. But I'm not really here to get into that. I want to talk about something a little more niche. The secret characters of the series. Now, outside of bosses and a few exceptions, most of these are just recolored versions of existing characters. Now, maybe that sounds lazy to you, but you gotta remember, back then, these characters were all hand-drawn, consisting of hundreds of frames of animation. Nobody's gonna spend the development time or the memory space on a secret that like 90% of people won't even see. So the devs get a little cheeky and they use what they have to make something new, and I just think it's cool. I won't lie, I like palette swap characters. You know the MK ninjas are cool. The Shotos too. Come on, you like Evil Ryu. Admit it. The deviations from what we're familiar with in these characters is interesting to me, and hopefully you too. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Red Venom, or Hyper Venom, or Carnage, or High Speed Venom is probably one of the more interesting characters of the bunch. Red here is often associated with several infinite combos, many of which are not that hard to do. However, outside of that, there's some more interesting stuff going on with this guy. Visually, he's a red version of Venom with an afterimage effect. He's considerably faster, but at the cost of having less HP. To play as Hyper Venom, highlight Chun-Li on the character select screen and input this code. Although it looks confusing, once you recognize the shape you're drawing, it gets pretty easy to remember. His walk animation is actually just Venom's dash animation. Also, most of his heavy attacks are replaced by Venom's medium attacks, and his medium attacks are Venom's light attacks. So then what are his light attacks, you're wondering? They're just his light attacks. So you get these weird instances where things like medium kick and light kick are identical. One exception is Light Punch, which is an entirely new punch made from the frames of Web Throw. His crouching attacks are all identical to regular Venom, although much faster. Crouching Heavy Punch is particularly oppressive given the added speed. Red Venom's jumping punches follow the same convention of his standing moves, where light and medium share the same animation, and his heavy is just regular Venom's medium air punch. His jump speed and the quickness of these aerial moves are what make many of his infinite combos possible. So the situation with his normal moves is an interesting oddity, but where he really starts to differentiate is his special moves, as they're mostly different from regular Venom. Instead of Venom Fang, he's given this advancing chomping mouth attack that hits multiple times and uses the frames of normal Venom's heavy punch attack. In the air, it's replaced by this dive kick-like move that reuses the frames of regular Venom's heavy air punch. Instead of Venom Rush, he gets this new multi-hitting attack based on the frames of Venom's heavy kick. The idea seems to be that it's a short-range version of Venom Rush, which fits his rushdown playstyle pretty well. And you can even mash the kick button for extra hits. Just like regular Venom, he still has access to Web Throw, although it does a little bit less damage. The different strength of punch buttons still affect the angle of the web. His two supers seem identical to his normal counterparts. Online people say that Venom Web has a faster startup and that Deathbite does slightly more damage. While analyzing the footage, I couldn't tell a difference between the two startups, and for sure Deathbite does the same damage as normal Venoms, at least on the Dreamcast port anyway. And finally, his grab animations seem completely unchanged from regular Venoms. He gets a nice minty fresh blue as a Player 2 color, and on the PS1 port he gets this nice light gray and this dark red. Red Venom would return in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, albeit as a skin this time for regular Venom. Now, it's never directly stated anywhere, but most likely Red Venom is a nod to Carnage, I would imagine, who, if you don't know, is another symbiote villain from Spider-Man, but I'm sure you know who this guy is. Alright, next up we got Orange Hulk, or Marvel Superheroes Performance Hulk, or MSH Sexual Hulk? What? Anyways, Sexual Hulk here supposedly plays like his Marvel Superheroes counterpart, although in practice that's not entirely correct. To play as Orange Hulk, again highlight Chun-Li on the character select screen and input this code. The shape you end up drawing sort of looks like a 34 to me, it makes it a little easier to remember.
Let's rock!
Strangely, even though he's called Marvel Superheroes Performance Hulk, he doesn't really play at all like this version of Hulk. In Marvel Superheroes, Hulk had this move where he could rip a piece of the floor out and either throw it or hold it above himself and decide to throw it later. It even matches the piece of the floor and terrain he ripped up. I have no idea how they did that. This move was replaced by Gamma Slam in the later games. In addition, in this version, he only has one super, which is Gamma Crush. Instead, Orange Hulk plays like the Hulk in Marvel vs. Capcom, with 3 supers and Gamma Slam instead of the floor pickup move. His main difference is that his normal moves are considerably faster, and unlike the regular Hulk, he doesn't have super armor. If you're unfamiliar, super armor allows Hulk to take one hit before being stunned, which is incredibly useful on some of his slower hitting moves. Unfortunately though, Orange Hulk doesn't have this, which leads to him kinda just getting stuffed in a lot of situations where he maybe could have traded. Now, while his normal attacks are obviously faster, I can't seem to notice a difference in speed between the special attacks. If there is one, it must be very minor. Again, like Red Venom, his command throw seems the same, although it does slightly less damage than regular Hulk's. In Marvel Superheroes, Hulk only had access to one super. However, Orange Hulk here has access to all 3, although they do less damage. The meteor in his Gamma Crush also isn't on fire, which is a fun callback to Marvel Superheroes. His Player 2 color is this nice blueberry one, and on the PS1 port he gets this monochromatic green and gray color scheme, which are kinda cool. Back in 1998, when Marvel 1 released, Orange Hulk wasn't based on any existing characters. Interestingly enough though, in 2012, a solar-powered Orange Hulk was introduced in the Uncanny X-Force. This Orange Hulk existed in an alternate universe and served the villainous Black Legion. Gold War Machine, or Hyper Armor War Machine, or Mega Armor War Machine is a super heavy version of James Rhodes. Or at least I think it is, we never get to see who's in there. His walk speed is slower, and he shakes the screen as he lumbers around. His dash also covers less distance. Additionally, he can't fly or block. So what does he get in return for all these downsides? Well, he's impossible to stun. That's right, he has infinite armor. To play as Gold War Machine, start on Zangief and enter this code. It sorta resembles a 56, but it's a little convoluted.
Yahoo!
Like I mentioned, his movement speed is a lot slower, but they also added a pause to each step and a screen shake to really make him feel heavy as hell. The stunted nature of his dash adds to this effect as well. His biggest asset is his titular hyper armor. As you can see, Goldie eats everything and keeps going. Nothing will stop him or knock him down outside of draining his entire life bar. This can make him hard to approach and almost impossible to combo safely. His normals appear to be slightly slower than regular War Machines. Uniquely, his crouching heavy punch now fires a short-range laser instead of a missile, and conversely, his high and low laser specials are replaced with missiles. Even his proton cannon fires missiles instead of the laser beam. Unfortunately, they didn't stick with the convention and make his War Destroyer fire lasers into the sky, as cool as that would have been. Interestingly enough, the missile-based projectiles and supers would become War Machine's moveset in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, with Iron Man using the laser-based special moves instead. Just like his regular counterpart, he can still use smart bombs. Unlike his normal counterpart, though, he can no longer use Repulsor Blast. And perhaps the biggest loss of all is his ability to fly. I guess it wouldn't really fit the super heavy motif. Just like the other Marvel secret characters, he gets this pale blue as a secondary outfit, and on the PS1 version he gets a pretty cool red and dark gray color scheme. In Marvel 3, one of Iron Man's alternate colors is this gold suit, which could be a reference to Gold War Machine, although I think it's more likely a reference to his Mark I version 2 suit, which features a gold paint job. If you're familiar with the comics, you might notice this War Machine doesn't really look like his comic counterpart. That's because he's a recolor of Iron Man from Marvel superheroes. His look in that game is based on the modular suit. As for why that change was made, I've read it was because Acclaim held the video game rights to Iron Man at the time. Now, as far as I can tell, War Machine never wears a golden suit of any kind. However, Iron Man did way back in Tales of Suspense. So it's possible Gold War Machine is based on this, but it's unlikely due to the rights issues. It could also be based on the Mandroid armor, which was developed by Stark Labs for use by S.H.I.E.L.D., but that's kinda unlikely too. So I've briefly covered where these characters may have come from or been inspired by in the comics, because in the Western version of the game there's nothing to go on as to who they might actually be. Turns out though, in the Japanese version of the game, there is tons of angsty lore for these guys. Based on their win quotes and interactions with Onslaught, the final boss, it's pretty cut and dry that there's some sort of evil psychic projections created by him. You get quotes like, "I am Onslaught's messenger, but why must I stop him?" and "Partner, I am right in front of you, a phantom created by Onslaught," and "You did not lose to me, you lost to Onslaught, the god of destruction." I think it's kinda cool that they get a little more character, and I wonder why it wasn't brought to the English version. Maybe Marvel had a problem with them creating characters even if they were just evil clones? Who knows? You guys know Morgan, right? Well, did you know that she has a Ken? Yeah, Lilith. This girl that appears in some of her animations and supers. That's who this next character is supposed to be, although in actuality, she doesn't really play much like Lilith at all. Lilith was first introduced in Darkstalkers 3, or Vampire Savior, as a separated portion of Morgan's power-given form. Lore aside, she's more of a speedy Rushdown character with different normals, special moves, and supers. The secret character, dubbed Lilith-style Morgan, uses Morgan's sprites and animations, and keeps almost all of her normal and special attack moves as well. The only real thing she has in common with the actual Lilith is a short-ranged fireball and a red and purple color scheme. To play as Lilith-styled Morgan, highlight Zangief again and enter this code. It's supposed to look like a 90, but I don't really see it. Her standing animation loses the little sparkles that regular Morgan's has. Her dash also seems to be the same speed as regular Morgan, as well as all her normal attacks. Yeah, a lot of information online claims that Lilith's moves are faster, but from my footage here, it doesn't really seem to be the case. An immediately noticeable change is her fireball, which is now a heart that travels about 2/3 of the screen before disappearing. It can also be fired in the air and disappears after a short distance. Aside from that though, she has the same command grab and dragon punch as regular Morgan. Another huge change to Lilith is the super she has access to. Instead of Solar Racer, she gets this barrage of bats, and her Silhouette Blade is replaced by this move where she uses Morgan like a weapon and lifts her into the air. Well, actually it's not Morgan, it is Lilith with Morgan's colors, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Darkness Illusion remains unchanged from her original version. Probably the strangest change of all was the removal of Morgan's level 3, Eternal Slumber. Lilith just doesn't have anything here. Her alt color is this nice violet one, and on the PS1 port she gets a cool green and pink. I really like that green. This red and blue Lilith color scheme would make a comeback in Ultimate Marvel 3 and Marvel Infinite as alternate palettes for Morgan. The color even sorta makes a comeback in Marvel 2, although it's a little darker, and an interesting little bit of trivia is the Lilith in her animations has the two-player color of Lilith-style Morgan from Marvel 1. And if you weren't sick of hearing me say Lilith and Morgan over and over again, to make matters more confusing, in Darkstalkers 3, there's a secret character that is a Lilith, colored like Morgan, that uses her sound clips. So it's sort of like an inverted version of the Marvel vs. Capcom fusion of Morgan and Lilith. Well, after a long list of recolors, we finally got a character with unique art, and one from Mega Man, too. A lot of cool Mega Man characters, you know, Proto Man, Bass, the Robot Masters, fucking Yellow Devil. Oh man, who's he gonna be? Well, you'll be excited to know that this game lets you play as Roll. Yeah, you know, Mega Man's sister. This girl. She's often described as a joke character, which is fair. Canonically, Roll is a housekeeping robot, but for the purposes of Marvel 1, she's a stubbier, generally worse version of Mega Man. So worse, in fact, that in most tier lists for Marvel 1, she's in her own bottom tier classified as Roll tier. But one thing that isn't low tier about her is this theme music. Do you hear this? To play as Roll, once again, start on Zangief and draw this pattern. Easily the simplest one of the bunch, so that's one perk if you were itching to be a Roll main. Her walk speed is ever so slightly slower than Mega Man's. However, her dash covers half screen. While Mega Man has stumpy normals, Roll takes it to a cartoonishly new extreme. Seriously, the size of these things are tiny even compared to how tiny she is. Unlike Mega Man, her Buster Shot is a motion input, but the projectile is wider. However, she can't charge it up like he can. She also has full access to Mega Man's secondary weapons, Tornado Hold, Rock Ball, and Leaf Shield. She calls in Eddie to swap between them just the same. A special move unique all to her is this exploding bouquet. The different strength of punch you choose will change their projectile's trajectory. As far as supers go, they're almost identical to Mega Man's. She can summon Beat to transform into Beat Plane, and she can also summon Rush to transform into Rush Drill. She even gets her own hyper form just like Mega Man, although unlike his, it's a little underwhelming as the projectiles are kinda awkward to hit with. For her Player 2 color, we get Roll in her goth phase, and on PS1 we get this cute pink and this nice blue and white. Yes, the final boss of Marvel 1 is actually playable. On consoles, anyway. Unlike all the other characters in Marvel 1, he's only playable in a special mode called Onslaught Mode, which is a never-ending series of battles until you lose. There's also the option to play Onslaught against a human player too as well. On the PS1 port, he could be used in the arcade ladder, but there's no final boss, and his ending is just the same one as all the other secret characters. As you might imagine, Onslaught is completely busted. Since he's a single character instead of a team of two, when his first health bar gets depleted, he switches to his second form. In his first form, any punches or kicks summon these Sentinel drones to bomb from above. It's very similar to Sentinel's bomb drop move. He still has access to this move in his second form, although it's only his kick buttons that do it now. Any punch buttons give you this big sweeping claw attack. In first form, Calling Assist calls in Sentinel to rush across the screen, sort of similar to Juggernaut. Quarter Circle Towards and Punch gives you Magnetic Tempest, which is very similar to the Magneto move of the same name. DP Motion and Punch gives Hyper Gravity, which again is almost lifted directly from Magneto. This move can be done in both first and second form. Quarter circle towards and kick gives you onslaught head crush, which seems to be a take on Juggernaut's head crush move. Quarter circle back and kick gives you this teleport. Where you wind up is determined by the strength of kick button you choose. In second form, half circle forward and kick gives this stage covering lunge attack. And again in second form, quarter circle forward and punch gives Mind Blast, which is a little shot that explodes on impact into a huge column. It can easily be abused for an infinite combo. His one hyper combo in second form is a variant of this move where he spams the shots across the screen. The same input in first form gives this beam super reminiscent of Cyclops or Iron Man. He also has access to the magnetic shockwave hyper combo, again very similar to the one Magneto has. And most unique of all, his level 2 super summons a random character to fight for you. They have about a third of a health bar and stay in until they're knocked out or until a short time limit is reached. On PS1, Onslaught summons a clone of the opponent that you can control. Okay, so there's one more secret character in Marvel 1 we gotta talk about, but before I get to that, I'm gonna take a little detour back to the game before this one, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. Now, this is probably the least appreciated of the Marvel vs. games, and I get it. Outside of a character exclusive to Japan, it features entirely reused assets. It's a little lazy maybe, but you gotta admit that announcer is great.
Gamma Crush! Gamma Crush! Chaos Dimension! Final Atomic Buster! KO!
Anyways, I'm not here to get into that. I'm here to talk about some secret characters, particularly ones of the weird palette swap variety. In previous titles, we had some playable bosses, Akuma a bunch of times, and even Chun-Li in different clothing, but not these weird versions of characters. They made their debut here. Maybe the extra time the developers had afforded by not having to make a bunch of new characters gave them time to experiment with this stuff. I'm not entirely sure, but without further ado. Alright, first up we have a robotic version of Zangief, Mecha Geef. If you're familiar with the later Street Fighters or Marvel 2, you've probably seen this guy as a skin or a transformation, but back in MSH vs. SF, which is what I'm going to be calling this game, he was his own character. Mecha Geef is slower, heavier, and can't block, but has hyper armor. Basically all the properties of Gold War Machine, but on a grappler. To play as Mecha Geef, highlight Black Heart and then depending on the system, input one of these codes. Outside of grabs or being outright killed, nothing is going to stun or knock this guy down. Despite this though, his walk speed and his dash speed are only a little slower, which I guess makes sense. Zangief is already a pretty lumbering character as is. His jump speed does take a pretty big hit though. I mean, you really feel it when you're trying to get this guy into the air. Also, his super jump covers way less distance. As far as I can tell, all his normal attacks are the same speed as regular Zangief's. If they are slower, it's very, very hard to notice. Most of his special moves remain the same as well, although there are some key differences. He could still do Screw Pile Driver, and it seems pretty similar to regular Zangief's version of the move. His flying power bomb is also pretty similar, but you can see the walk-up speed is way slower. Regular Zangief just gets in there quick. The close version, Atomic Suplex, seems unchanged as well. Aerial Russian Slam functions exactly the same once it connects, but the jump distance on the startup of the move is way different between the two Zangiefs. Mecha Geef still gets access to Lariat, which is probably Zangief's most iconic move. And speaking of iconic moves, Green Hand, which is blue in this game, is nowhere to be found on Mecha Zangief's toolkit. No, instead he gets this blue version of Dalsam's Yoga Flame, called Vodka Fire.
Now, in MSH versus SF, Zangief only has one super, which is Final Atomic Buster, and Mecha Zangief can do that too. But he's got another super as well, Siberian Blizzard, which is like this upwards lariat. His player 2 color is this nice blue tint, and on PS1 he gets this like atomic green, which sort of loses the robotic theme to me, but I think it's made up for with this purple and gold color. It looks great. In his arcade ending, in the Japanese version at least, we find out that this is the original Zangief turned into steel or into a robot somehow by M. Bison. He says, "It's as if he's calling me," and in the arcade version of the game you see M. Bison back there, but on the Saturn port there's just nothing, so I'm not sure what's up with that. In later games, Mecha Zangief becomes a transformation for regular Zangief, and it's explained that like Doctor Strange melded them together with magic or some bullshit, but who cares? Mecha Zangief also features as a costume in Street Fighter IV, and as a little cameo outside the window here in the Cosmic Elevator stage. He's also a skin for Zangief in SF5, looking a little more Shadow Louie here, and who knows, if you're seeing this from the future, maybe he's a skin in Street Fighter VI. So, you know Evil Ryu. Well, what if they gave Sakura the same treatment? Well, that's exactly what this next character is, and it's as fun as it sounds. Although, she's not really evil. No, this is Sunburnt Sakura, or Dark Sakura, which seems to be a parody of the whole evil Satsui no Hado thing. From the Shadowloo Combat Research Institute webpage, it says, Sakura trained together with Ryu during the summer vacation and learned various new moves, including mastering one that delivers 1,000 strikes in an instant. Having trained on a beach in a southern country, Sakura got a deep suntan. So her powers aren't the result of having awakened some latent power, just pure determination. As you might expect, she's a more mobile version of Sakura with a few extra tools. To play as Dark Sakura, highlight Hulk, and then from there, depending on your system, follow one of these instructions. As far as I can tell, her walk speed is about the same as regular Sakura's, but where her mobility really shines is in her dash. You could just spam this thing like crazy because it has little to no recovery on it. And just like Akuma and the other evil characters, she gets this warp to go through projectiles and stuff like that. Again, as far as I can tell, it seems like Dark Sakura's normals are about the same speed and everything as regular Sakura's. That seems to be common amongst these Marvel superheroes versus Street Fighter secret character palette swaps. Unlike Sakura, her fireball goes horizontal instead of diagonal, and it's done with a traditional input. It can also be done in the air, just like regular Sakura, although the input is forward instead of backwards like regular Sakura. Her Tatsu is the same as regular Sakura's too, with the different strength of kick changing the arc that it travels in. She keeps Sakura's regular running Shoryuken move called like Shuriken, I think, but it's now done with a DP motion instead of a fireball motion. Can also still be done in air. She gets Ryu's Shinku Hadouken as one of her supers instead of her version that shoots at a diagonal. However, she keeps the mid-air Sakura super, although now it's done with a DP motion instead of a forward fireball motion, and it does way more damage than regular Sakura's version of the move. She also keeps the Tatsu super Haru Ichiban, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing correctly, but just like mid-air Sakura, it does way more damage than the regular version. And of course, being an evil version of a character, she gets a Raging Demon. Dark Sakura's player 2 color and alternate colors in general, befittingly, are just darker versions of regular Sakura's alternate colors. Just like Mecha Zangief, Dark Sakura makes a comeback in Marvel 2 as a transformation for regular Sakura. Unlike most of these secret characters, she actually gets her own ending in the Japanese version anyway, and here it is. Alright, so the 3 Marvel secret characters in this game are not exactly the most interesting gameplay-wise, although they do have a few changes. They're more interesting, though, in who they represent. And so up first here we got Armored Spider-Man, which is Spider-Man wearing his spider armor, which makes him a little heavier and grants him 1 hit of armor like the Hulk. Peter created this suit composed of what he describes as a pseudo-metallic composition in Web of Spider-Man issue 100 to give him an edge when fighting a group of villains known as the New Enforcers. It's destroyed in the same issue by this guy Thermite that melts it and then freezes it. Anyways, to play as this version of Spider-Man, highlight Spider-Man and follow the instructions on screen depending on your version. For being a big old heavy boy, his walk speed sure doesn't take a hit. It seems about the same? And for sure his dash is identical too. However, his jump height is where he really starts showing off that girth. As you can see, it's just a little bit lower than regular Spidey. As far as the normal moves go, they're about identical, and that's a trend we're going to see with these next couple characters, but I thought I'd leave them in so that you wouldn't have to take my word for it. You can see the comparison side by side. Same thing goes with his special moves, although it would have been cool if they made his web ball bounce somehow, because that is what it does in the comic. Even though his jump height is lower, his Shoryuken height isn't. And his web swing is identical too, although you can't start it as high due to his jump height. Web throw functions the same as well, although it does less damage. And just like regular Spider-Man, the strength of punch affects the angle it shoots off at. Armored Spider-Man has the same two supers as regular Spider-Man, although like a lot of these armored characters, they end up doing a lot less damage. This Player 2 color is a straight up improvement in my opinion. I think that purple pops so much more than the monochromatic grays and blacks of the default skin. Feels a lot more Capcom-y, and I'm shocked they didn't go with it as the default. On console, his heavy punch color seems to be a reference to the Negative Zone suit, which Spider-Man briefly wears in the Identity Crisis saga, and by briefly I mean like 3 panels. And then this last one's just kind of stinky. It looks like the white part got a little too sweaty. Got some BO stains on this one. I don't like it. So I mentioned that the Marvel characters in this game aren't too different from the characters they got palette swapped from, and these next two are really going to show that off in the most extreme way. Armored Spider-Man gets some super armor on the ground, but Mephisto here isn't so lucky. Now in the comics, Mephisto is Blackheart's dad, who is more or less Marvel's stand-in for
Satan! Satan! Satan!
which, you know, is a pretty cool character to base things off of. But in actuality, he is just a red Blackheart in this game. I mean, moves, super moves, everything, it's all the same. To play as Mephisto, highlight Omega Red and then follow the instructions on screen. For a lot of these characters, I do research online to see what people say the differences are, and then I try to test them the best I can and just sort of see what I can find, because sometimes there's things that aren't documented very well or seem to be wrong. But for this guy, I really could not find any differences whatsoever. His movement speed, his normals, his jumping, everything, his damage even, it's all the same. So, essentially, he's just a red Blackheart, which is a little disappointing, but the more I researched into it, the more sense it kind of made as to why he's like this. Now, personally, I think it would have been neat if they got rid of some of his projectiles and sped him up a little bit into some kind of weird rushdown character, but, you know, I'm not a game dev, I don't know. Now, aside from the red coloring, there is actually one more difference, and it's this fire effect that he adds on hit, which Blackheart does not normally have. I always thought it was strange that they used Blackheart recolored to represent Mephisto. I know Mephisto is his creator or his dad or whatever, but I thought he looked like this generic kind of Satan guy. Turns out, though, in the 90s, he looked like this, which, yeah, kind of looks like a red Blackheart. I see where they're coming from. Delving even deeper, there's cut content of an attack Blackheart would have had where he would have summoned Mephisto to grab you and breathe fire on you. So maybe the recolor was their way of getting him in there in some way? As far as his alternate colors go, it's a lot of red, which makes sense, but this Player 2 one's kinda cool with the orange and green, very dynamic, and then this wine-colored one ain't bad either, and this purplish kind of one's cool too. Overall, pretty good color schemes.
At least Mephisto got a fire effect, but this guy, he's got nothing whatsoever. They clicked copy-paste, shifted those blues to blacks, and they called it a day. And while that may seem like the laziest of all these characters, and it sorta is, in some weird way, it's also incredibly accurate to what this character is supposed to be. As you see, US Agent is a copy of Captain America. They are the same.
They look the same. Wow. They look so goddamn like the same person. I would say to them, you want ice cream cone? Both of them say yes.
To play as US Agent, highlight Dictator here and do the same thing I've told you for all these other characters. Anyways, gameplay-wise, there's not much to say about this guy, so instead I'll briefly talk about who he's supposed to be. So, the US government has a commission on superhuman activities called the CSA, and they basically copyright strike Captain America for using their branding. So he says fuck it, he makes a black costume and calls himself the Captain. Then the commission hires this guy John Walker, who's got superpowers from the sex pervert scientist guy in Jessica Jones Season 2, Dr. Malice, who also becomes Carnage at one point, but anyways, John Walker gets screwed over pretty hard, his parents get killed, his secret identity gets revealed, and it turns out the CSA was actually ran by the Red Skull. So Steve Rogers becomes Cap again, and John here becomes US Agent, and they do a uniform switcheroo? Well, before that, I guess, the Commission fakes his death, and he returns as US Agent as part of the West Coast Avengers team to keep tabs on them. But then that shit gets disbanded, and he changes costumes and gets an energy shield, and he works on this team that Tony Stark makes called ForceWorks. Anyways, all of his alt colors are just greens, various shades of greens, nothing too notable, except for his heavy punch color on console, which gets these cool red after effects on the shield throws and his shield bash. Pretty neat. Personality-wise, he's depicted as far more unhinged, insecure, and violent than Steve Rogers, and this is reflected in his only other difference outside the color swap, his win quotes. We get such classics as, "Shut up, trash, don't call me a fake," and "I'm not scared of blood or violence, I'm not such a coward," and "Pray to your god, you bastard." Like most things in this game, Apocalypse also makes his return from X-Men vs. Street Fighter, only this time the poor guy's been demoted. Yeah, he's just a sub-boss this time around. He is playable though, albeit only on PlayStation, most likely as a consolation prize for the missing tag mechanics on that version. To play as him, you're going to have to beat the arcade mode without continuing once, and then hit select 5 times on Akuma and then punch or kick. He's certainly a strange case. He moves incredibly slow, he has no normals, but he does have a dash. Yeah, by hitting all 3 punches or kicks, he'll move his ass across the screen pretty quick. So yeah, he has no normal moves, just special moves, and starting out we got this shockwave fist slam where he smashes his fist into the ground and sends out a shockwave. And then after that we got a mace ball hand where he smashes his mace ball hand into the ground and doesn't send out a shockwave, so it seems like a complete downgrade. He's also got this shoulder cannon attack, which seemingly at random will fire one of 2 projectiles. One of these big balls that split into little balls, and then the other one of these balls that home in on your balls. He's got these 2 little computer-controlled satellites too that'll randomly just take pot shots at the opponent, and the opponent can destroy them, but they'll come back pretty quick. He also has this move where he charges back and sweeps the screen with a laser, but why would you use that when you have this drill move that functions almost identically, except it hits like 1,000,000 times? Look at this! Why is it like this? Since this game is more or less an asset flip, having Apocalypse as the final boss again would be kinda lame, so they needed to whip up something quick. So what did? They did a Mugen-style sprite edit of Akuma. Yeah, Cyber Akuma, or Mecha Goki in Japan, which I think is a much better name, honestly. I don't know what was up with everything being cyber in the 90s. I mean, he's more mech than cyber. Cyber is like computer networks, right? Anyways, it doesn't matter. This is Akuma after being roboticized by Apocalypse, and he is an absolute monster. Now, he isn't playable on arcade, but to play as him on Saturn, you gotta beat Survival Mode, which is a series of 14 fights ending with the 2 bosses, where your health carries over into the next fight, only marginally refilling between, and if you lose, it's over.
You go back to the beginning? No continues? no extra lives?
But if you could do that, you can now hit the L button on the survival mode and Mech Goki Now should appear instead, where you fight Mech Goki again, and if you can beat him this time, you can now select him. All you have to do on the character select screen is hold start and pick Akuma, and then just do it again. His walk speed seems about the same as regular Akuma, but his dash is a little crazier. It recovers faster and it moves further. His jump seems directly copied and pasted from regular Akuma, no difference here. And his teleport seems to travel a little further than regular Akuma's, although it's hard to tell. Almost all his normals are unchanged too, except for his heavy punches, which are now a homing rocket fist. I wasn't sure of a better time to talk about this, but isn't it weird that Apocalypse gave him some metal sandals? What's up with that? His crouching normals are pretty unchanged too, except for, again, the heavy punch, which fires the homing fist up into the air. While his fireball comes out the same and travels about the same speed, you can see it's a lot larger. When done in the air, he fires off 2 instead of 1, a nod to Shin Akuma, no doubt. His Shoryuken travels the same height as regular Akuma's, but they give him these goofy little robot wings, which I kinda like. It also hits a ton of times, which is probably a reference to Shin Akuma as well. Tatsu is pretty much the same, although it gets yellow energy and a little electricity sound effect. Dive Kick is functionally the same too, but it adds a blue fire effect on hit. He has all the same supers as regular Akuma, but the damage is cranked up to an insane degree. The energy used in most of these attacks and radiating off of them is now yellow instead of purple too, I guess to represent the extra charged up power of these moves. And speaking of extra charged up, his Fireball super's way crazier. I mean, look at the size of those things. And of course, Mecha Akuma has the Raging Demon, although his only costs 1 bar as opposed to regular Akuma's 3, and it does an insane amount of damage. He can also do it in the air, which is crazy. As for alternate colors, this Player 2 red's pretty nice, but man, this golden purple, some glamorous shit. What, did Exhibit get a hold of him? Anyways, this last one stinks. Cyber Akuma would make a comeback years later, albeit as a costume, in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and in Street Fighter V. The Street Fighter V costume even has the colors from this game too, which is a great touch. And who knows, maybe when he releases in Street Fighter 6, he'll get a Cyber costume then too. Okay, we're in the home stretch now, viewer. I grouped these last 2 characters together because they actually have something of a continuous story. Yeah, we got a little bit of lore. Up first we got Shadow. Nah, not that one. Nah, this Shadow is actually just Charlie from X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Yeah, he's a secret character in this game. You see, at the ending of that game, he was captured by M. Bison and crew and was transformed into a cyborg killing machine. Evil cybernetic upgrades aside though, Charlie pretty much plays identical to his X-Men vs. Street Fighter counterpart. More or less they just copied and pasted him over and cranked his saturation down. To play as Shadow, highlight Dalsum and follow the instructions for your version of the game. So yeah, move speed, normals, jump height, it's all the same from X-Men vs. Street Fighter, which is where this footage of regular Charlie comes from. And that's all nice if you're a Charlie player, he's pretty much just in this game too. However, there are a couple of little differences here and there, I mean, aside from his palette change. For one, his win quotes, in the Japanese version at least, are more tortured, with stuff like, "If you ever meet a man named Guile, tell him Charlie is dead. And the Air Force lieutenant who burned with a sense of justice has already died. My name is Shadow." Another little visual change they added was now his flash kicks and sonic booms ignite the opponent with a blue flame on hit, probably to show off the psycho power he's been infused with, which is M. Bison's mystical evil energy, if you didn't know. I want to talk real quickly about Moonsault Slash, which originated from these games and has a really unique input, like an upside-down fireball. In fact, I think Magneto is the only other character with that input, but regardless, cool move. The most unfortunate change, however, is they added this little flash of his eye before he does a super, and while it looks really cool, it makes it really easy to react to these and see them coming. And that alone is what I believe makes him low tier in this game, but outside of that, they function the same. He does get a new super in this game, Final Mission, which costs all 3 bars and functions sorta like a raging demon. Shadow would return in Marvel vs. Capcom 1 as a hidden assist. If you hold Light Punch, Medium Kick, and Heavy Punch while picking your assist, you'll get him, and he does a version of Shadow Justice as his assist move. I'm gonna be honest with you, these alts don't really do it for me, although the second player one seems to be a take on his normal second player one, and this Heavy Punch one seems to be a take on an Alpha 2 costume. This red one, though, I don't know what this is a reference to, although in Marvel 2, he has an all-red costume like this, so maybe it was inspired from here? Who knows? In the ending of his arcade ladder, at least again in the Japanese version, since we didn't get any of these cool endings in the English version, his battery runs out and he's captured again by M. Bison, and further modified into even more mecha evil Charlie, which, wouldn't mind playing as this version of Charlie. Maybe if we get another Marvel vs. Capcom game, maybe someday, we can have this as like a skin or something for Charlie. Shadow actually did make another appearance in Street Fighter V's Extra Battle Mode as a hard fight against a souped-up version of Charlie. Yeah, who was that guy? What we just saw was Chun-Li's ending from Marvel vs. Capcom 1, where she's about to be captured and turned into some kind of cyborg killing machine, just like Charlie, but is saved at the last minute by him. But what if she didn't get saved? Well, this next character is exactly that. Yeah, Shadow Lady. No, not that. Unlike Shadow, though, Shadow Lady isn't just Chun-Li copied and pasted. The robotic nature of the character is actually reflected in her gameplay, as well as her design. And while she also gets the low saturation treatment, they did this cool thing with her palette where the detail work on her jacket pulses with light. She's still built off the base of Chun-Li, so her movement, her dash, her air options, and all her normals are about the same. To play as Shadow Lady, you're going to want to highlight Morgan and then input this code, which looks like a 78, I can kind of see it. She still has a crazy fast walk speed just like Chun, and her dash is far and quick. Retains the same air options, the same jump height, she has the triple jump, she has the air dash, makes her a very mobile character. All of her normals appear to be about the same as regular Chun-Li, including her command normals, except for one, oddly enough, which we'll get to in just a sec. She still has this flip move from regular Chun-Li, but she doesn't have this short-range fireball move, which is really weird because it seems like it would fit perfectly with the cybernetic Chun-Li. Speaking of fireballs, she doesn't even have one anymore. Now, in place of that, we have this Drill Rush move, which itself is taken from the sprites of Rush Drill, Mega Man Super. She also loses Chun-Li's kick DP move and now does this weird shock force field move. It hits multiple times. While she may not have a fireball, she does have a projectile attack in the form of these homing missiles, which are slow to come out but pretty oppressive once they're on screen. She still has Chun-Li's iconic lightning kick move, and she can still perform this overhead flip kick too. Her supers, though, are all completely different. The big energy ball attack is now replaced with a beam attack, which borrows the animation from War Machine's proto-cannon. Her lightning leg super is now this missile barrage move, which seems impossible to combo into, but does decent chip damage. She completely loses the DP super, with nothing to replace it, and it's the same case for her aerial super as well, nothing there. But she does have, just like Shadow, the final mission super move, which costs 2 bars and functions like a raging demon. Her alternate colors seem loosely based on Chun-Li's alternate colors, with her 2-player color being a red, just like regular Chun-Li, but it has this nice green accent color, which I'm always a fan of color schemes that can use those 2 colors and not feel like Christmas. And then on PS1 she's got this great purple and this nice green and purple, both really cool colors for the character. In her ending, we see a defeated Jin being hovered over by Bison, mirroring Chun-Li's ending. This time, though, both Shadow and Shadow Lady jump in to help Jin. However, his only hope of survival now is to become a cyborg just like them. Maybe if Marvel 3 came out sooner, this version of Jin would have been a secret playable character. But we'll likely never know. Shadow Lady would also make an appearance in Street Fighter V's Extra Battle Mode, and she's pretty bananas in this game.
Oh god, she found a way through. Okay. I don't believe it! Oh, what in the... She can guard cancel out of things. I want to play this game. I want to play the game she's playing. Can I play that game?
So yeah, there you have it. An unnecessarily deep look at the bizarre secret characters of the Marvel vs. Capcom franchise. Thank you for watching. Oh, and before you go, one more thing.
Thumbs up, soldier!